Hey guys, I am Akanksha and I welcome you all to this video tutorial on Microsoft Azure by Intellipaat. So I bet you guys already know that Microsoft Azure is the second largest cloud platform right now. But did you know that more than 80% of the Fortune 500 companies are extensively using Microsoft Azure? Now think of the career opportunities Azure can open up for you. With such a large and ever-increasing user base, there is no doubt that there is a huge demand for Azure skilled professionals as well. So now that you know why you should be interested in learning Azure, let's move forward. But before that, do subscribe to Intellipaat's YouTube channel so that you never miss out on our upcoming videos. Now let's go over the agenda first. So first of all, we will learn what is cloud computing and why do we need it. After that, we will learn about the various cloud computing models and how they are different from each other. And then we will learn about what is Microsoft Azure. And then we will discuss various Microsoft Azure services. After that, we will learn the concepts of resources, resource groups and subscriptions in Azure. After that, we will perform a hands-on to learn how to create and manage these resource groups in Azure. And then we'll finally have a quiz to recap what all you have learned from this tutorial. So don't forget to put your answers down in the comment section below to know if you're correct. Also guys, if you want to become a certified Azure professional, then do check out Intellipaat's Azure certification training course. The link is given in the description box below. So now, without any further delays, let's get started. So, cloud computing. You must have heard this word a lot since it's the latest buzzword in not only just the IT industry but also in all other industries as well. But what makes everyone so interested in cloud computing? Well, time to find out. So, let's say you had a business idea and now you want to launch an application. So, to do that, you'll have to first invest some money and then buy some servers and then you'll be able to launch your application. Now let's say your application takes off overnight, which means that the user base of your application increases significantly and so does the load on the servers that are hosting your application. So to deal with this situation, you went ahead and you invested some more money and bought some more servers. So now the application traffic that was coming to your application is now distributed among all these added servers and your application is back on without any hindrances. But what if the traffic to your application keeps on increasing? Well, it's good for business, but the load on your servers will also keep on increasing, which actually might cause your servers to crash. Now, how will you deal with this situation? Well, one option is that you can hire a maintenance team and that maintenance team can help you fix those servers. But again, that is also a very expensive option. And this is just one case scenario that can affect your business. There's a whole another case scenario that we haven't even discussed yet. That is, what if the traffic to your application starts decreasing? Well, in that case, all the servers that you bought to manage this increased traffic will now be of no use to you. It'll be just sitting idle there. So what will you do with all these extra servers that you have? Well, you can't get rid of them because you have invested so much money in them. Plus, what if the traffic increases again? If the traffic increases and you got rid of them right now, then you'll have to buy new servers again in the future. So it seems like you've only left with one option. You will have to keep these servers. Now, if you do decide to keep these servers, then you cannot just leave them without any monitoring and managing. After all, even if they're sitting idle, after all, you may need to use them again and you don't want them to run into any problems when you are actually using them again in the future. So you will have to again pay for the monitoring and managing charges to the maintenance team to monitor all these servers that are just sitting idle there. Now, that doesn't seem very cost effective, does it? So for all of these problems that you're facing while hosting your application on-premise, that means on your own servers, cloud computing was actually introduced as a solution. So now let's see how cloud computing solved all of these problems. But before that, let's also have a quick look at all the problems that we just faced. So the very first problem that we faced while we were hosting our application on-premise was scalability, which means that you had to increase the hardware as the user demand increased. And then you also had to increase the staff to maintain the servers, right? And then there was the problem of high cost. You had to buy so many servers when the traffic increased and then you had to pay for their maintenance and then you also had to pay for the maintenance of servers that were not even in use, right? And then as for the servers that you include for your application, all the servers need to be managed and monitored continuously all the time. Quick info guys, If you want to become an Azure certified professional, then do check out Intellipaat's Azure certification training course. The link is given in the description box below. Now let's continue with the session. And then there is one more problem, that is slow data recovery. Let me explain. Since you are hosting your application on the servers on-premise, that means on your own servers, that means all your application data also resides on those servers, right? So in case of any server failure or server crashes, your application data could actually get lost. And if you lose your application data, your application will face a major downtime. Along with that, it's a very long process to recover the data that is stored on on-premise servers. Plus, it requires high budget and resources. Alright, so now let's see how cloud computing solved all of these problems, starting with scalability. Well, with cloud computing, all the scaling needs of your application to meet the demands of your application are always taken care of. And as for the cost, you will only be asked to pay for the resources that you use and for as long as you use. So you won't be left behind with some idle resources on your end that you're not able to use, so you won't have to pay for those resources. Coming to the servers that you use for your application, servers as well as all the other resources that you use for hosting your application are actually maintained by the cloud vendors themselves. And for data recovery, cloud actually offers faster data recovery and automated backups to store your data and keep your data secure. So that is how cloud computing solved all these major problems. So now that you know why you should be interested in cloud computing, let's move ahead and understand what exactly is cloud computing. Cloud computing by definition is the delivery of computing services like servers, storage, databases, networking, software, analytics, intelligence, and more over the internet. So let me make this definition a little more relatable by associating it with the cloud computing example that we just saw. So basically, if you're hosting your application using cloud computing, then all the services that you need to host your application, for example, servers, storage, databases, and networking, and many more, all these services will be provided to you by cloud providers over the internet. So you will be able to access these services once you use cloud computing using the internet. So putting it in simple words, cloud computing is basically accessing and using various computing services and resources over the internet. So as a user, all you have to do is go to a cloud provider, and the cloud provider will give you access to various computing resources or services that might include virtual machines, storage, and many more. Alright, so now that we know why do we need cloud computing and what is cloud computing, let's move forward and understand or learn about the various cloud computing models or the types of cloud computing. So in cloud computing, we basically have two cloud computing models. First is service models, and then we have deployment models. Now these models also have further categories. In service models, we have infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. Whereas in deployment models, we have public cloud, private cloud, and hybrid cloud. The deployment models are categorized on the basis of how you can deploy your applications on cloud, whereas the service models are actually categorized on the basis of the kind of services that you get. For example, whether you're getting an infrastructure or a whole platform or just a software. So now let's go ahead and discuss all of these cloud computing models one by one, starting with service models. So in service models, we have infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. So infrastructure as a service means delivering the whole infrastructure of a general computer as a service. In infrastructure as a service, you get complete access to server's operating system, processing power, and more, which means that you can basically rent a fresh piece of computer from cloud providers, and after that you will decide whether you want what kind of OS you want in that computer or what kind of processing power you want. So basically you get the access to the whole infrastructure of that computer. Coming to platform as a service, as opposed to infrastructure as a service, in platform as a service, you do not get access to the whole operating system. You are given the access to an already set up environment where you can run or develop your applications. That means that you do not get the access to the whole infrastructure of the computer. What you do get is an already set up environment where everything is already pre-installed so that you can just directly start running or developing your application on that environment. So for the software as a service means delivering a whole software to the customer as a service so the customer can directly access and use the software via the internet without having to install or update anything. A very common example of software as a service that we all have used is Google Drive. We just go to our browser and we can just open our Google Drive, right? We don't have to install it or update anything. We can just access it using internet. Alright, so now let's move ahead and discuss the deployment models, all of the deployment models one by one, starting with public cloud. So public cloud refers to the standard cloud computing, which means that the cloud provider offers resources such as virtual machines, storage, applications to the general public over the internet. So basically, public cloud is actually provisioned for open use by general public, which means that anyone can use or access public cloud as long as they pay for it. Now, moving to private cloud. Private cloud is a pool of resources meant exclusively for a single organization. So it's not open for general use, it's meant exclusively for a single organization. So that is how private cloud differs from public cloud. Unlike private cloud, public cloud can actually be used by general public, or we can say that public cloud can be used by absolutely anyone. So to understand the difference a little better, let's look at this example. So here we have bus and a car. So as you all know that a bus is accessible to anyone and it's meant for general public, whereas a car is owned by a single person and it is not meant for general public. So in this example, the bus represents the public cloud here, whereas the car represents the private cloud. So moving on, now let's discuss the hybrid cloud. Now hybrid cloud refers to a cloud computing environment that uses the combination of both private as well as public cloud. An organization is most likely to use hybrid cloud when they want to use private cloud to store their confidential data, but they also want to use public cloud for their shared resources and services that they use with external partners. Alright guys, so that was all for cloud computing models. Now let's move ahead and understand what is Microsoft Azure.
So Microsoft Azure is a cloud computing platform offered by Microsoft. It's completely owned and managed by Microsoft itself, and it offers various web-scale cloud services. Microsoft Azure is actually the second largest cloud platform today in the cloud market. Let's learn a little bit more about Microsoft Azure. It was launched in 2010. It is used by more than 90% of the Fortune 500 companies. It offers free tier subscription for the first 12 months and then offers pay-per-use pricing model. It offers support for various languages such as C#, Node.js, Java, and more. It has 54 regions all around the world, which is actually more number of regions than any other cloud provider all over the world. It has been made available in over 140 countries. What this basically means is that Azure data centers are all around the world, so it doesn't matter what region you are in, you can just start using Azure and Azure services. Talking about Azure services, let's move on and discuss Microsoft Azure services. So Microsoft offers various web-scale cloud services which are grouped together on the basis of different business usage. These groups are called domains. Some of the main domains are compute, networking, storage, and database. These are not the only domains provided by Microsoft Azure. There are so many more, but these are the main domains, which means that as an Azure cloud professional, you'll mostly be working on these domains. So now let's see what kind of services are there in each of these domains, starting with compute domain. So in compute domain, we basically have 4 services offered by Azure, that is virtual machine, function app service, and Azure Kubernetes service. So let's discuss all of these services one by one. So virtual machine. Virtual machine is an infrastructure as a service offering from Azure. It allows users to launch Windows and Linux machines, virtual machines of their own choice of configuration. So that makes sense, right? Because infrastructure as a service is basically all about enabling the user to go for their own kind of configurations, right?
Quick info guys, if you want to become an Azure certified professional, then do check out Intellipaat's Azure certification training course. The link is given in the description box below. Now let's continue with the session.
So moving on, we have App Service. App Service is a platform as a service offering by Azure. This service provides already set up environments for developers for hosting and managing their applications. And then we have Function App. This service lets users run code or functions in cloud without actually having to manage underlying resource services. That means users do not need to worry about the servers that they're going to use for running their code, or the installation of all the requirements that are needed to run their code. All they have to do is use Function App service from Microsoft Azure, and then they can run their code on cloud. After that, we have Azure Kubernetes service. This is a managed container orchestration service based on Kubernetes system. This service is used for microservice-based architectured applications. So moving on, we have networking domain. In networking domain, we have 5 different kind of services offered by Azure. So let's discuss them one by one. So first is virtual networks. Virtual network or VNet is a logically isolated network in the whole Azure cloud dedicated to your subscription only, which means that in the whole Azure cloud, there is going to be a sub-cloud that is going to be dedicated wholly to your subscription. Then we have load balancers. This service is used to distribute incoming traffic among multiple healthy virtual machines. And after that, we have application gateway. So application gateway is a web traffic load balancer that lets user manage the traffic to their web applications. So what's the difference between application gateway and load balancer? Well, application gateway works at application layer, that is layer 7, whereas load balancers work at the transport layer, that is layer 4. Application gateway can be used on top of load balancers to actually make routing based decisions, which means that you can make routing based decisions to route the traffic based on the kind of requests you're getting to your application. For example, let's say you developed an application and there's a pool of virtual machines that is wholly dedicated to the image upload in your application, and there's another pool of virtual machines that is dedicated or that handles the form submission in your application. So what you can do is you can distribute the traffic among all the virtual machines using load balancers. And how you decide that what kind of traffic should go to which kind of virtual machine? For that, you can use application gateway. You can specify that the traffic that requests for image upload should go to the pool of virtual machines that handles image upload in your application, and the other kind of traffic that requests for form submission should go to the pool of virtual machines that handles the form submission in your application. So that's how application gateway works. After that, we have DNS zones. This is a hosting service for domain in Azure. So basically you can host your domain in Azure and then you can manage your DNS records. After that, we have CDN profiles. Azure Content Delivery Network is a CDN solution by Azure. It is used to store cached version of applications or storage in different regions. So basically it enhances the availability of your application. So moving on, let's discuss the services offered by Azure in the domain of storage. So here we basically have 6 services: Azure Blob, Azure File Storage, Tables, Queues, Data Lake Storage, and Databox. So starting with Azure Blob, Azure Blob is an object type storage in Azure. It can be used for storing large amounts of unstructured data. After that, we have File Storage. This service is a file storage solution by Azure. It supports the SMB, that is Server Message Block Protocol. After that, we have Tables. So Azure Tables are used to store large amount of structured data. It's a NoSQL database, so it basically stores non-relational data. After that, we have Azure Queues. This service is used for storing large number of messages that can be accessed from anywhere in the world using internet, that is, using authenticated HTTP or HTTP calls. And then we have Azure Data Lake Storage. Azure Data Lake Storage is an enterprise-wide hyperscale repository for big data analytics workloads. Azure Data Lake enables you to capture data of any size or of any type and ingestion speed in one single place for operational and exploratory analytics. After that, we have Data Box. This service can be used to move data to and from Azure quickly. Azure Data Box offline devices easily move data to Azure when busy networks are not an option, while Azure Data Box online appliances transfer data to and from Azure over the network. So after storage, we have the other domain, that is database. So Azure offers SQL database, Cosmos DB, Data Factory and Data Lake Analytics in database domain. So let's discuss them one by one. SQL database. It's basically a SQL server but on cloud. It works to create, scale and extend applications into the cloud using Microsoft SQL Server technology. Now, most of us have used Microsoft SQL Server, right? So, SQL database is same as Microsoft SQL Server. The only difference is that it's on cloud. So, next is Cosmos DB. Cosmos DB is a NoSQL database service that implements a subset of SQL select statement on JSON document. After that, we have Data Factory. This service is a fully managed service for composing data storage, processing, and movement services into streamlined, scalable, and reliable data production pipelines. After that, we have Data Lake Analytics. So Azure Data Lake is a scalable data storage and analytics service for big data analytics workloads that requires developers to run massively parallel queries. So these are all the services that are offered by Microsoft Azure in these main domains. Moving forward, now let's see how to create a Microsoft Azure account. To create an Azure account, all you have to do is follow these simple steps. Now, I would like to draw your attention to the step 7 that says that you will be asked to fill in your card details. Now, you won't be charged in your free period. That means that Azure offers free tier subscription for the first 12 months. That means that even though you are entering your card details, you won't be charged at all for the first 12 months as that will be your free subscription. After that, you will be asked to upgrade your subscription. If you want to use more Azure resources or Azure platform, you will only be charged if you upgrade your Azure subscription. So I believe that you'll be able to follow these steps to create an account. It's actually a very simple procedure. So moving forward, now let's see that once you have created your account, how you can access your Microsoft Azure platform. So there are basically 3 ways that you can use to access Azure platform. For those who prefer GUI, there is Azure Classic Portal. For those who prefer command line tools, can use Azure PowerShell or Azure CLI. So let's now discuss all these 3 ways separately. Starting with Azure Portal. Azure Portal is a web-based unified console that lets users access and manage Azure services. Using Azure Portal, users can build, monitor, and manage their applications on Azure Cloud. To sign into the portal, users need to have an Azure account, which means that as soon as you create your account and sign into your account, what appears on your screen is your Azure Portal. So let me show you guys. To access your portal, all you have to do is type in portal.azure.com. If you have already signed in, your portal will be directly appearing on screen. If you haven't signed it, then Microsoft will ask you to sign in. And as soon as you sign in, this is what you will see on your screen. This is Azure Portal. So as you can see on the left side, I have a list of all the services offered by Microsoft Azure that I can use. and then there's dashboard, home, and whole lot of other options given to me by Azure. So going back, let's now see other ways of accessing your Azure platform.
Quick info guys, if you want to become an Azure certified professional, then do check out Intellipaat's Azure certification training course. The link is given in the description box below. Now let's continue with the session.
Next we have Azure PowerShell. Azure PowerShell is a task-based command line shell. It's built on .NET Framework and lets users control Azure's robust functionality from a command line. So it's basically a command line tool that you can install in your machine and run it locally. Or what you can do is you can access PowerShell from your Azure account. To do that, let me show you how you will do that. Once you have signed into your account, this is what you will see. All you have to do is click on this button here that says Cloud Shell. Once you click on it, you will be given two options, that is Bash and PowerShell. So if you click on PowerShell, the PowerShell command line tool will be opened for you and you can start using it directly. So that's how you access PowerShell from your Azure account, or alternatively you can also run it locally from your machine. So moving ahead, so the next tool that we can use to access or use Azure services is Azure CLI. Azure CLI is a cross-platform command line tool that is used to manage and monitor Microsoft Azure platform and services. Since it's also a command line tool, it provides an alternative for PowerShell. Again, you can use Azure CLI by installing it into your local machine and then running it locally. Or what you can do is you can also access it from your Azure account. Now to do that, again you'll have to go back to your account, and again when you click on this button here that says Cloud Shell, you know what PowerShell here does. So if you click on Bash, you'll be taken to your Azure CLI command line and there you can start using it. So going back, these are the main tools that are used to access or monitor Microsoft Azure platform or services. Moving ahead, now let's understand Azure resources and Azure subscriptions. So first of all, let's discuss what are Azure subscriptions. So Azure subscription is an active agreement between the users and Microsoft. This agreement provides users the needed access to provision Azure services and resources. So what happens is that the users need to have Azure subscription in order to use all the services offered by Azure, and then once the user have subscription, it means that the user has the permission to use the services. Now to actually start using those services, the users can use various tools such as Azure Portal, Azure CLI and Azure PowerShell. Now to use all these tools, the users also need to have an Azure account, right? Like we saw before, we first had to create an Azure account and then only we were able to access our Azure portal, and if in case the user chooses to use Azure CLI or Azure PowerShell using Cloud Shell, then also they need to have Azure account. So where does Azure account fit in this Azure subscription part? Let's see. So Azure subscriptions are associated with Azure account, which means that once you have the Azure subscription, that means you have the permission to use Azure services. Now, to use Azure services, you will need to create an account. Using that account, you can access the tools that are used to manage or actually use those services. Azure accounts are also where the user can track the usage and billing of their Azure services. And there's another point to note here is that user can have multiple Azure subscriptions associated with a single Azure account. So moving ahead, let's now understand what are resource groups. But before that, let me tell you what is a resource in Azure. So resource is basically any manageable or any service offered by Azure. That means a resource can be a virtual machine or a database or anything. So now what is a resource group? Resource group in Azure is simply a collection of related Azure assets or Azure services that belong to an application or workload together, which means that resources that share the same management lifecycle are grouped together, and those groups actually are called resource groups. For example, as shown in this diagram here, the user has two resource groups. First one belongs to the LOB application, where the user has grouped the resources that he was using to develop this application. Second resource group belongs to infrastructure as a service workload. That means that user has grouped together all the services that he was using for this same or this particular workload. So that's how you use resource groups in Azure. So now that we know what are Azure subscriptions and Azure resource groups, let's move ahead and understand the relationship between these two. So as we know that to use Azure services, you need to have an Azure subscription. Now once you have the Azure subscription, you can start deploying resources within a resource group, and that resource group has to be associated with your Azure subscription. Also, you can create multiple resource groups in one Azure subscription. So that was all about Azure resources and Azure subscriptions. Moving ahead, let's now understand Microsoft Azure Resource Manager, that is ARM. So Microsoft Azure Resource Manager is a deployment and management service for Azure resources. For example, deploying the resources or creating the resources, deleting them, and everything else related to the resources is done using ARM, that is Azure Resource Manager. So users can use ARM to create, update, delete resources in Azure subscription, and ARM also offers features like access control, auditing, and tagging to secure and organize resources after the deployment is done. So let's understand Azure Resource Manager in a little more depth, right? So Azure Resource Manager actually plays the role of a mediator in the whole underlying architecture of Azure. What I mean by that? Let me explain further. So by now you know that to access or to use any of the Azure resources or Azure services, you'll have to use one of the tools provided by Azure, right? So what are those tools? Those tools are Azure Portals, Azure PowerShell, and Azure CLI. So there's one more thing called REST clients that can be used to access or to use Azure services. But what are REST clients? REST clients are basically APIs that you can include in your application to make your applications be able to access and use Azure resources directly. For example, let's say you created an application. That takes two input from the user. So first input is username and the second input is an integer. So what your application will do is that it will take that username and it will open the Azure account for that username, and then it will launch virtual machines equal to the integer number given to that application by the user, given to that application as an input by that user, right? So to make your application be able to do that, you will have to include REST APIs in your application. So that's how REST API or REST clients work. Now what happens is that when you use any of these tools, any of these ways to take actions on Azure resources or to access or use Azure services, the request first goes to Azure Resource Manager. For Azure Portal and REST clients, the request directly goes to Azure Resource Manager, whereas for Azure PowerShell and Azure CLI, the request first goes to SDK and then it goes to Azure Resource Manager. So now what Azure Resource Manager will do is that it will take that request and it will authenticate and authorize that request, which means that it will basically check that as an Azure user, do you have the permission to do what you're trying to do using any of these tools, right? For example, let's say you have a free tier subscription and you are using Azure PowerShell to access or to use one of the Azure services that is not free to use. Now, since it's not free to use, that means that according to your free tier subscription, you will not have permission to access that service, right? So when you try to take that action using PowerShell, your request will go to Azure Resource Manager, and Azure Resource Manager will check whether you have the permission to do what you're trying to do or not. Since you do not have permissions in this case, your request will not get authenticated. But let's assume that you do have permission. Then what Azure Resource Manager does is that it authenticates your request and then it further routes the request to the appropriate service. For example, let's say that using PowerShell you try to launch a virtual machine. So that request will go to Azure Resource Manager and then your request will get authenticated, and after that then Azure Resource Manager will route the request to the virtual machines in Azure. So that is how Azure Resource Manager plays the role of a mediator in the whole underlying architecture of Azure. So I hope all these concepts are clear to you by now. Now this brings us to the end of the theoretical part of this session. Now let's move on to the demo part of this session, where we will learn how to create resource groups and how to deploy resources and how to manage those resource groups. But before that, let's have a quick walkthrough of all the topics that we covered in this session. So first of all, we covered the basics of cloud computing. We learned what is cloud computing, why do we need it, and we also looked into various cloud computing models. After that, we learned the basics of Microsoft Azure. We learned what is Microsoft Azure, and then we learned about the various domains in which Microsoft Azure offers services. After that, we looked into various services offered by Azure, and then we also learned how to create an Azure account. After that, we learned what are the various ways of accessing Azure Cloud Platform, and then we moved on to the topic of Azure resources and subscriptions. We learned what are Azure subscriptions, what are Azure resources, and what are Azure resource groups. After that, we saw the relationship between Azure resources, resource groups, Azure subscriptions, and Azure account. After that, we learned about Azure Resource Manager. We learned about the working of Azure architecture, and we learned what role Azure Resource Manager plays in the underlying Azure architecture. So this was our whole session. Now let's move on to the demo part and see what all we have to do. So first of all, we have to create an Azure resource group and then deploy Azure resource in the resource group that we will create. After that, we have to manage the Azure resources. So let's move on and do that. So now I'll go to my Azure portal by typing portal.azure.com on my browser. Alright, so this is my Azure portal. Now before we move ahead and start creating the Azure resource group, let me first walk you through all the elements or all the options that you see here on your Azure portal. Now when you go to portal.azure.com, you'll be presented with a screen that looks something like this. Now along the left side of your screen, you'll see a list of all the Azure services that you can actually use. Now on the top left corner, here we have Microsoft Azure text. It's actually clickable, so whenever you click on it, you'll be taken back to your home page. So wherever or in whichever dashboard you are, whenever you click on Microsoft Azure, you'll be taken back to your home page. To the right of that, we have this search bar. So like I said, Azure offers various number of services. There are so many services, so all of them cannot be listed here in your left panel, right? So if you want to use a service that is not listed here in this list, then you can go ahead and search for it from this search bar. And then to the right of it, we have this Cloud Shell icon, which I have already shown you before. You can use to launch your command line. You can use this Cloud Shell option to launch PowerShell or Azure CLI without actually having to install any of these on your local machine. So to the right of that, we have Azure Directory and Subscription icon, which shows the information about your current subscription and your current account. To the right of that, we have notification icon, which will show you the notifications of various things, like whenever you use or whenever you perform an action on any of the Azure resource or any of the Azure services, you'll get a notification about that, or you'll get the notifications about your billing and charges and everything else. This notification actually comes in handy in situations where you have launched or deployed a resource, but it's taking a quite bit of time, so you're not sure whether it's done or not. You can just click on this notification, and there you will see a bar showing whether your deployment is under process or whether it's done or whether it's cancelled. So moving ahead, to the right of this notification icon, we have settings icon, which you can use to modify the settings of Azure portal. And then to the right of that, we have this help icon, which you can use to search for online help regarding any doubt that you might have about this Azure portal. And then to the right of that, you have this feedback icon, which you can use to give your feedback to Microsoft Azure. And to the extreme right corner, you have this you have your own account, wherein you will get the information related to your personal account, right? So now, before we move forward, let me also tell you that Microsoft Azure offers you with a few number of themes that you can keep on your Azure portal. So right now, to change the theme of your Azure portal, all you have to do is click on settings, and there are the themes that are offered to you. Right now it's dark. You can keep it as white or light, or you can choose any one of these. So for me, I'll keep dark theme. Now, as you already know that Microsoft Azure offers various cloud-based services, right? So you can basically go ahead and choose any of these services to perform any function that you want. So let's say for this demo, we want to create a resource group that will consist all the resources that are going to be needed to further create an application. Now, we will not be creating the application, but for this demo, let's say that we need to group together all the resources that we will need to create an application. Fine. So let's go ahead and create a resource group for that. Now, to create a resource group, what I'll do is I'll go here in my left panel and click on resource groups. Now, as soon as you click on the resource groups option here, you'll be taken to a page that looks like this. Now, on this page, right now we don't have any resource groups. Right now we haven't created any resource group yet, so that's why it says no results. But if you had resource groups already created, then they will all be listed here. And then you can see that there are various options available to you here. For example, this filter option, wherein you can actually filter the resource groups that are listed here if you had any resource groups. And then there is edit columns option, which can help you add or remove columns related to your resource groups that might be helpful to you. And then of course there is add button. As you can imagine, this add button is used to create a new resource group. So you can either click here or you can click on here on create resource group. Either way, you'll be taken to same page. So let's now start creating a resource group by clicking here. Now, as soon as I click on the add button, I'll be taken to a page that looks like this. So on this page, I have to provide certain information about the resource group that I want to create. So among those information is subscription. So since I am already in free trial subscription, so I am going to keep it that way only. Then comes the resource group. That means I have to provide a name to my resource group. So I'll go ahead and name it Post RG. So after naming my resource group comes the region part here. So for region, I'll keep it the default region only. So this does not mean that your application has to be in the same region as your resource group. No, it just means that your resource group is located in this region. So since I'm going to keep it the default value only, so I'm going to go ahead and click on review plus create now. So here is all the details that I've filled for my resource group. Now I just have to click on create. and it says that validation has passed and my resource group has been created. Now as you can see, as soon as the resource group was created, I got a notification that a resource group has been created. So if I click on refresh, here's my resource group. So like I said, all the resource groups that you create will be listed here for you to explore or use. So this is my first resource group that I've created, and I can see that it's been listed here. Now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and click here and then click on pin to dashboard. You'll know what that does in a minute. So for now, I did this for my convenience only. That does not have anything to do with the demo part, but I did it for my convenience. Let me show you what that did actually, and to do that, I'll go to dashboard here. Now in this dashboard, as you can see that these are all the options that were already available there. These are just the shortcuts for you to directly go ahead and start a resource from here, so that you don't have to search for resources in the search bar or here in the left side panel. So below that, as you can see, there is my resource group listed here. So whenever I create a resource group and I click on pin to dashboard option, my resource group will be available or pinned here on my dashboard. So right now, as you can see that there are no resources in my resource group. So let's go ahead and create or deploy some resources in this resource group. So now that we have created our resource group, we can actually go ahead and now deploy our resources in this resource group. So to do that, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and click on this app services option here, and then I'll click on add. And now as you can see, I've been presented with the similar kind of page that was presented to me while we were creating a resource group. Here in this case, I have to provide information about the resource that I want to deploy, right? So the first field is subscription. Now of course I want to use a resource that comes under my free trial subscription only, so I'll keep it as free trial. Now moving ahead, the next option is resource group. That means that I have to provide the name of the resource group where I want to deploy this resource. So I'll go ahead and select first RG because I want to deploy a resource in this resource group only. Now as you can see, there's an option of create new here. So that means that either you can go ahead and create your resource group before you launch or deploy your resource in that resource group, or you can directly go to the resource and then click on create new and then click your create your resource group and then deploy your resource. So since we have already created our resource group, I'm just going to move ahead. So now I have been asked for the name for my resource. I'll just name it app. So now as for the name for your resource, it has to be unique. So I'm just going to name it app 3546. Alright. So after name comes this publish option, which actually asks you whether what you want to upload or publish to create your application. So I'm going to keep it as code only because that's what I want to publish in future whenever I'm developing my application. After that comes the runtime stack. So after that comes this runtime stack option where you can choose a language for your application development. Any of these languages you can choose. So I'm going to go ahead and choose PHP here. Now one thing to note here is that for all these languages, some of the languages are supported in Linux OS and some of the languages are only supported in Windows OS. So how you'll know which of these languages are supported in which of the OS? Well, let me show you. If I select this ASP.NET here, as you can see that the OS automatically went to Windows, right? That means it's only supported in Windows. I cannot select Linux here. That means for Linux, this language is not supported. So for this demo, I'll select PHP language here. It's supported in both Linux and Windows. As you can see, I can change the operating system here. So I'm going to go ahead and keep the operating system as Linux only. After that comes this region part, wherein you can select the region for your resource. Now I'm going to keep it as default only, but you should know that the resource that you are going to deploy in your resource group does not have to be in the same region as your resource group. Resource group and the resource that you want to deploy in that resource group can be in different regions. So right now I'm going to keep it as default. So moving ahead, we have this new field to be filled, that is called app service plan. Now app service plan basically decides the pricing of my application here on the basis of location, features, cost, and compute resources associated with your application. So since I want to use the free resources, I am going to change this default plan here, because this plan is probably not for free tier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on create new here and give a name for my plan. So I'm going to name it as free, and then I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. So now that I have created a new plan and named it free, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the resource that I want to use. So for web app resources, in free trial of subscription, the web app resources of 1 GB of size are free to use. So that's what I'm going to select here. So I'm going to click on change size here. And as soon as I click on change size, this is what I'm presented with. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on this dev/test option here. And as soon as I do that, here you can see that I've been presented with two pricing tiers. The first one is 1 GB of memory, and it says that it's free. So I'm going to go ahead and select this and then click on apply. Now I have selected my resource, and I have created a free service plan for me, because I know that the resource that I have selected is free to use, and I have filled in all the other details. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on review and create. So these are all the details that I have filled in for my application resource that I want to deploy in my resource group called first RG. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on create. And as you can see that I have received a notification. First one was initializing deployment, and the second is submitting deployment. And now the notification says that my deployment is in progress. Okay. So this might take a few seconds, but as soon as your deployment is completed, you'll get a notification, and you can confirm your deployment of the resource by going to the resource group and going inside the resource group that you created. You will be able to see the resource there. So let's wait for a few more seconds for this deployment to be completed. But now it's completed, and as you can see in my notification, I have a notification here saying the deployment has succeeded. So now I'm in my resource group. Let me show you again how to do that. You just have to click on resource groups, and then there's a resource group where you have deployed the resource. So just click on first RG, and there you can see the deployment has been completed and your app here has been deployed. The resource that you want to use to create your app here has been deployed in your first RG resource group. So that is how you create a resource group and then you deploy resources in that resource group. So moving ahead, let's see what. So now we have created an Azure resource group, and we have already deployed Azure resource in that resource group, right? So now what we have to do is we have to manage Azure resources. That means for that we have to move Azure resource from one resource group to another. Alright, so guys, going back to my portal, since we have already created a resource group and we have already deployed a resource here, I'm just going to create another resource group and then move these resources from this resource group to that another resource group. So now as you know how to create a resource group, I'm just going to go ahead and create a resource group called second RG. Alright, and there you go. I have received a notification saying the resource group has been created. So in my resource group area here, if I click on refresh, as you can see, the resource groups that I have created are being listed down here. So now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go in my first resource group. As you can see, the resources that I have deployed in my first resource group are here. So the resources are, first of all, the resource that I want to use to create my app, and then other resource is the app service plan that I created. So to move one of these resources or to move both of these resources to that second resource group that I've just created, all I have to do is go to the resource group where the resources reside. That is first resource group in our case, and then click on this move button here, and then I get two options here: move to another subscription, move to another resource group. Now since it's clear that I want to move the resources to another resource group, I click here. Now the second option here, you'll know what it does when we get to that topic or when we get to that module. So for now, I'll go ahead and click on move to another resource group here. And now I can select which one of the resources that reside in my first resource group do I want to move to the second resource group. So I can select all here, or I can select just one of these. So I'll just select this free app service plan here, and then I'll move this resource to my second resource. Now below here, as you can see, I have to provide the resource group name field, where I have to provide the name of the resource group where I want to move the resources, right? So here I'm going to give the name second RG, because that is a resource group where I want to move this app service plan resource. After giving the name, I have to check this box and then click on OK. Is still in progress. As you can see here, it says moving resources. So let's wait a few more minutes for it to be completed. Group and see what's the status there. So this is my second resource group and it says moving resources. If I click on refresh resource group, the free resource plan that I had created is no longer here. So if I click on my notifications here, as you can see, I have received a notification saying moving resources complete. That means that the resource that I wanted to move has been moved. So let's confirm that by going to my second resource group. So for that, I'll click on resource groups here, and then I'll go into second resource group. And as you can see, the free app service plan that I had created in my first resource group is now in second resource group. So that is how you can move a resource group from one resource to another resource group.
Alright guys, so now it's time for a quiz. So here's my question to you guys. A user can only have one Azure subscription associated with one Azure account. Is this statement true or false? Do let us know what your answer is to this question in the comment section below. Quick info guys, if you want to become an Azure certified professional, then do check out Intellipaat's Azure certification training course. The link is given in the description box below. So this brings us to the end of this session. If you have any doubts, feel free to comment it down below and we would love to help you out. Thank you for watching.